A late-night patrol? Or the perfect setup? When a veteran white cop thinks she can rough up a black businessman and walk away smiling, she has no clue who she's just tangled with. Because this man? He's not just passing through town, he's the one holding the keys to her entire career. What starts as a traffic stop explodes into a war of pride, power, and payback. And trust me, you won't believe how far this goes until you hear every twist for yourself. So grab a coffee, settle in, and let us know what time you're tuning in and where you're watching. Drop a comment down below. We love hearing your stories, your thoughts, and your take on justice. And hey, if you're ready for more jaw-dropping stories like this, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Would you like me to draft a similar ending outro for consistency? You ever drive through one of those small southern towns where the air feels like it's holding its breath, like even the trees are waiting for something to snap? That's Mobile, Alabama. A place where the heat sticks to your skin and the past feels like it's lurking around every corner. Old brick buildings, crooked telephone poles, and rusted-out pickup trucks that haven't run in years. Everybody knows everybody, or at least they think they do. And tonight feels heavier than usual. Officer Linda Crawford grips the steering wheel of her patrol car, her fingers tapping against the leather, restless. 58 years old, 35 of those spent in uniform, patrolling these same cracked streets. She's not just a cop here, he's a legacy. Widow of the town's former police chief, the woman folks nod to at church, the one the young officers try to impress. She's seen it all, or so she thinks. It's late. The air's thick, about 88 degrees, even after the sun's gone down. You can taste the salt blowing in from the Gulf. The streets are nearly empty, except for the glow of neon signs buzzing over shuttered diners and liquor stores. She's got one eye on the road and the other on the rear view, watching shadows move across cracked sidewalks. That's when she sees it. A sleek, black Cadillac SUV rolling a little too smooth down Monroe Street, chrome shining under the streetlights like it doesn't belong here. No turn signal, just sliding through a stop sign like it owns the place. Linda narrows her eyes. Something about that car rubs her the wrong way. Not because of the stop sign, not really. No, this feels personal. The kind of vehicle that screams money, power, outsider. Somebody who thinks the rules don't apply to them. She flicks on the lights. Red and blue flash through the muggy night. The SUV coasts to a slow stop in front of an old corner store, the kind with dusty windows and a flickering beer sign. Linda steps out of the cruiser, boots crunching against the gravel. She takes her time walking up. There's a little smirk playing on her lips. She knows this dance. She's done it 1,000 times. She's in control here. The window rolls down, smooth as silk. And sitting there, cool as can be, is a black man in a tailored, charcoal gray suit. Early 50s, clean-shaven, calm. Too calm. His hands rest on the wheel like he's done this before. "Evening, officer," he says, his voice low and steady. Linda leans down, squinting at him. "License and registration." She snaps. "No, please. No small talk. Just authority, sharp and cold." The man tilts his head, not a hint of fear in his eyes. "Mind telling me what this is about?" Linda feels her jaw tighten. This guy's not nervous. He's not stammering, not sweating. That calm confidence, it eats at her, makes her want to knock him down a peg. "Failure to stop at that sign back there," she bites back. He lets out the smallest breath, almost like a laugh, but doesn't argue. He reaches slowly for the glove box, hands deliberate, measured. He knows the rules, knows the game. And somehow, that makes her even angrier. She snatches the documents from his hand, barely glancing at the name on the license, Daniel Price. "You live around here?" she barks. He doesn't answer right away, just leans back in his seat like he's sizing her up. Finally, he says, "I don't see how that's relevant." And that's it. That's the spark, the thing that pushes her over the edge. "Out of the car," she snaps. His jaw tightens, but again he doesn't argue. He steps out, standing a good few inches taller than her. Sharp suit, polished shoes, like he just stepped out of a boardroom instead of a convenience store parking lot. Linda doesn't care. She shoves him toward the back of the SUV, forces him to spread his hands on the trunk. She leans in, pressing a hand to his back. And before she even realizes what she's doing, her fist connects with his jaw. Just like that. He stumbles, catching himself on the bumper, blood already blooming on his lip. But when he turns to face her, he's not scared. He's not angry. He just looks her dead in the eye and says, "You'll regret that, officer." "Linda?" She just laughs, steps back like she's already won. She tosses his license on the driver's seat and tells him to get back in the car. And just like that, the night moves on. But oh, she has no idea what she's just started. The next morning rolls around like nothing ever happened. The sun's already up, burning through the humidity, pushing the temperature toward 90 before it even hits 9 a.m. Linda's back at the station, leaning against the vending machine in the break room, sipping on a lukewarm cup of cheap black coffee. She's replaying that moment in her head, how that man's face snapped to the side when her fist landed, how he stood there, bleeding but silent, how he promised she'd regret it. Linda scoffs to herself. Regret? Please. She's been wearing a badge longer than most of these rookies have been alive. Men like him come and go. It's nothing she hasn't handled before. Her phone buzzes on the table. Dispatch. Mandatory roll call in the conference room. Mandatory? That's new. She grabs her hat, buttons up her uniform, and makes her way down the hall, passing her rookie partner, Kenny Lewis. Kenny gives her a nervous little nod, but doesn't say a word. That's fine. She's used to working solo anyway. The hallway smells like old coffee and floor wax. She pushes open the double doors into the meeting room, expecting the same boring safety talk they've heard 100 times. But the second she walks in, she knows something's off. Everybody's already sitting, quiet, tense. Even the jokers in the back row aren't cracking wise. You could hear a pin drop. And then she sees him, standing at the front of the room, the same man from the Cadillac. The man she punched in the jaw just hours ago. He's standing there in a perfectly pressed navy suit, no tie, just cool and composed. His lip still shows a faint bruise, but his eyes? Sharp as glass. Linda freezes, heart slamming against her ribs. It can't be. No way. The captain clears his throat, stepping up beside the man like nothing's wrong. All right, listen up. This is Daniel Price, our new police commissioner. He'll be overseeing operations starting today. The room erupts into polite applause, hesitant, but they do it. Linda feels her throat go dry. Her palms start to sweat. She glances around, hoping nobody recognizes him. Maybe he'll let it slide. Maybe he doesn't even remember her. But then, his eyes lock on hers, dead center of the room. No blinking, no smiling. Just that icy, calculating stare, like he's peeling her apart without saying a word. Linda swallows hard, trying to keep her face straight. She grips the back of the nearest chair just to keep her hands from shaking. He knows. Of course, he knows. And she knows it too. The captain keeps talking, something about new leadership, new policies, community engagement. But Linda doesn't hear a single word. All she can hear is that voice from last night, playing on repeat in her head. You'll regret that, officer. And now, that officer is standing in front of her department, in front of her team. And he's the one giving the orders. The weight of it hits her like a brick to the chest. She's not looking at some stranger in a fancy suit anymore. She's looking at the man who holds her entire career in the palm of his hand. Linda shifts in her seat, heart pounding. She doesn't know what's coming next, but whatever it is, it's not going to be good. And as Daniel finishes his introduction, giving the room a polite nod, he lets his gaze fall back on her one last time. Just for a second, and he smiles. Not a big smile, not a friendly one. Just the kind of slow, cold grin that says checkmate, and Linda knows, right then and there, her life is about to get torn apart piece by piece. She doesn't remember leaving that meeting. Honestly, she couldn't even tell you what anyone said after Daniel's little introduction. It's all a blur, just a swirl of sweaty palms, dry mouth, and that damn grin of his burned into the back of her brain. By the time she snaps out of it, she's already back at her desk. Same old desk she's had for years, second from the end, right by the busted coffee machine. It used to feel like her little corner of the world. Now, it feels like a trap. And just when she thinks she might catch her breath, here comes Captain Brooks, standing over her like a shadow. He doesn't sit. He doesn't joke. He just leans down, whispers 5 little words that knock the air clean out of her lungs. Commissioner Price wants you off patrol. That's it. No explanation, no discussion, just desk duty, effective immediately. Her jaw tightens so hard it feels like it might snap. Desk duty? After 35 years on these streets? After everything she's done for this department? That's a slap in the face. A public one. Linda wants to argue. She wants to slam her fist down and tell them to go to hell. But something stops her. Maybe it's that little voice in her head reminding her who's pulling the strings now. Or maybe it's the way every single officer in that room is suddenly pretending they aren't listening when you and I both know they're hanging on every word. So, she swallows it, forces herself to nod like she's fine with it, like it doesn't bother her one damn bit. She spends the next few hours pushing papers, logging traffic reports, filing incident slips for rookie officers who barely know how to spell their own names. And every time someone walks by, she feels their eyes on her. Some look nervous. Some look downright smug. Kenny Lewis, her rookie partner, keeps glancing over at her from across the room. He opens his mouth a few times like he's gonna say something, but he doesn't. Not a word. He just sits there, tapping his pen against the desk like he's trying to disappear. By lunchtime, the tension is thick enough to choke on. Linda leans back in her chair, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the walls are closing in. She's been here too long to let something like this get to her. She's fought bigger fights. She's survived worse. Right? But this doesn't feel like just another bad day. This feels like the beginning of the end. And then, just when she thinks it can't get any worse, it does. She pulls out her phone to check the time, and there it is. A text from one of the old-timers who retired last year. Heard what happened. Watch your back. He's gonna take you apart slow. Linda stares at the screen, her stomach twisting. She wants to believe it's just talk, just some old buddy stirring the pot. But deep down, she knows better. Daniel Price isn't the kind of man who throws a punch and walks away. No, he's the kind who waits. The kind who smiles while he watches you crumble, one piece at a time. And as the clock ticks toward the end of her shift, Linda realizes something she's never felt before, not in all her years wearing that badge. Fear. Not fear of getting shot, not fear of some thug on the street. This is different. This is the kind of fear that gets inside your head and stays there. The kind that whispers, "You've already lost, and you don't even know it yet." And as she gathers her things to head home, she glances back one last time, and there he is, Daniel Price, standing in the hallway, talking to Captain Brooks. He doesn't even look at her. He doesn't have to, because Linda Crawford knows exactly what's coming. And trust me, it's only just getting started. The thing about a small town like Mobile, secrets don't stay secrets for long. Not here. Not when everybody knows everybody. Not when gossip travels faster than the morning news. Linda knew that. She's lived it. But what she didn't know, what she never saw coming, was just how fast the streets would turn on her when the truth finally hit the light of day. It started like wildfire small at first. A shaky cell phone video posted to some random Facebook page by a teenager who just happened to be standing outside that old convenience store. No captions, no context. Just 7 brutal seconds. 7 seconds of Linda Crawford, in full uniform, stepping up to a black man in a suit and laying him out with a single punch to the jaw. No audio, no explanation, no backstory, just fists, just violence, just a white cop punching a black man. That was all it took. By the time Linda woke up the next morning, the video had already made its way from Facebook to Twitter to TikTok and back again. 10,000 views. 20, 50. Then came the hashtags. Number, Justice for Daniel. Fire Linda Crawford. Number, No More Corrupt Cops. By lunchtime, local news vans were parked outside the precinct. Protesters started gathering by the dozens, then the hundreds, holding signs, chanting her name like she was public enemy number 1. Linda stood at the window, staring down at the crowd. They were filling the sidewalks now, shoulder to shoulder, faces red with anger, voices rising louder with every passing minute. Fire Linda Crawford! No justice, no peace. Accountability now. The signs were brutal. Protect and serve, more like threaten and hurt. Crawford's gotta go. Our tax dollars fund racism. Linda couldn't breathe. She pressed her palm to the glass, her heart pounding so loud she swore the walls were shaking. This wasn't just some online drama. This was real. And the worst part? She couldn't even fight back. Not really. Because standing in front of that angry crowd, calm, collected, Perfectly untouchable was Daniel Price. He didn't hold a sign. He didn't chant. He just stood there with his arms crossed, watching the storm roll in like he'd planned it all along. Inside, the precinct was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Officers whispering in corners, glancing over their shoulders like they were waiting for her to explode. Even Kenny Lewis, the rookie who used to follow her around like a lost puppy, couldn't meet her eyes. He just kept his head down, typing reports with shaky fingers, like the walls were closing in on him too. Captain Brooks pulled her aside before shift change. His face was pale, sweat collecting on his upper lip. He didn't even sit down this time. He just handed her a formal suspension letter, 60 days, without pay. No hearing, no explanation. Just one signature away from losing everything she'd built. "You're lucky it's not worse," he muttered under his breath, like he was trying to convince himself. "The commissioner, he's giving you a chance to step back quietly." "Take it, Linda. Don't make this harder than it already is." Linda's hands shook as she stared at that paper. 60 days. No paycheck. No badge. And what burned the most? It wasn't the punishment. It wasn't even the money. It was the fact that Daniel didn't have to lift a finger. He didn't have to say a single word. The crowd did it for him. By sundown, the protesters had doubled in size. Police had to put up barricades just to keep them from breaking through the front doors. Reporters were swarming, cameras flashing every time someone shouted her name. Linda tried to leave quietly out the back door, but it didn't matter. Someone spotted her. The shouting grew louder. She ducked her head, rushing toward her car as bottles and cans hit the pavement all around her. She slammed the door shut, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Her eyes burned not from the sweat or the heat, but from the humiliation. She peeled out of that parking lot like she was running for her life. And for the first time in 35 years, Linda Crawford didn't feel like a cop. She didn't feel like a protector. She felt like prey. As she drove home, windows up, hands trembling, she knew she was sitting on a powder keg. One spark, and her whole life was going up in flames. And guess what? The man holding the match was Daniel Price. Linda spent the next 2 days locked inside her house. Curtains drawn tight, lights off, just sitting there at her kitchen table, staring at that suspension letter like it might somehow rewrite itself if she looked long enough. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News alerts, missed calls, angry voicemails from people she'd never met in her life. The worst part? It wasn't just strangers. It was people from church, from the grocery store, from the neighborhood she'd lived in for over 30 years. Folks she used to wave to on Sunday morning snow, calling her a racist, a disgrace, a criminal. She wanted to scream, wanted to tell them all they didn't know the whole story, that she'd been protecting this town long before they ever knew who Daniel Price was. But what would it change? That video was already out there, and once something hits the internet, it's got a life of its own. By Monday morning, she couldn't take the silence anymore. She dragged herself back to the station, hoping maybe foolishly that things had started to settle down. But the second she walked through those doors, she knew she was wrong. Dead wrong. The place was a pressure cooker. Whispers hit her from every corner. Officers looking up from their desks just long enough to stare, then quickly turning back like she was some kind of ticking bomb. Even Kenny wouldn't look her in the eye. He just sat there chewing his lip, typing God knows what on his report screen. And then the word came down. Internal Affairs. They were officially opening a file on her. Not just for the punch. No, that would have been too easy. They started pulling old complaints, things from years ago, stops she barely remembered, people she couldn't even name. Some from 5, 6, 7 years back. Excessive force, racial profiling, abuse of power. None of those claims had ever gone anywhere before. No one had ever pressed charges. It was noise back then. But now it was fuel. Fuel for the fire already burning under her feet. Captain Brooks called her into his office again. Same heavy stare, same tight jaw. But this time, there was no quiet suspension. No, step back and let it blow over. This time, he slid a thick stack of paperwork across the desk. Witness statements, civilian complaints, and sitting right on top a recommendation for termination. Linda's throat closed up. She could barely breathe. "I didn't do this," she choked out. "Those are lies. They're reaching. You know me, Brooks. You know I'm not that person." But Brooks wouldn't meet her eyes. Wouldn't say a word. He just pushed a pen toward her. "You've got 60 days to defend yourself," he muttered, like he didn't even believe it himself. "Lawyer up, Crawford. You're on your own now." Linda grabbed the papers with shaking hands, stormed out, and slammed the office door so hard the glass rattled. The bullpen went dead silent. Every head turned. Every eye burned into her back as she shoved her way outside, gasping for air like the walls had closed in around her. She sat in her car, clutching that stack of papers, shaking like she'd just walked off a battlefield. Because in a way, she had. Daniel Price hadn't fired her, yet. But he didn't need to. He'd turned the system on her, and now the very department she'd bled for, the badge she'd lived by, the family she thought she had, they were all lining up to watch her fall. Linda knew right then this wasn't just about that punch. This was a war, and she was losing. It's funny how people scatter when things get messy. When Linda was on top, they couldn't wait to slap her on the back, crack a beer, or ride her reputation like it was their own. But now, you couldn't find a single friendly face in that whole building if your life depended on it. Except for one. Late that night, after another day of sitting in her truck outside the station, afraid to face what was waiting inside her house, her phone lit up. A number she hadn't seen pop up in years. Hank Rivers, old school mobile, her husband's partner back when the badge actually meant something. The guy who used to sit on her porch with a six-pack while her husband grilled ribs on Sundays. After her husband passed, Hank kinda drifted off like most of them did, but there he was now, texting 3 words that stopped her cold. "Need to talk. Tonight." She almost didn't reply. But something about it, something about the way the air had been pressing down on her all week made her cave. She sent him her address. Told herself it was probably nothing, just another retired cop wanting to say he was sorry she was getting dragged through the mud. But when Hank showed up, he wasn't carrying sympathy. He was carrying a warning. He stepped onto her porch looking older than she remembered. Same leather jacket, same scuffed boots. But his face, it looked like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't even sit down. He just stood there, eyes darting to the street like somebody might be watching. "Linda," he started, his voice low. "You're in deeper than you think." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed tight. "Tell me something I don't know." But Hank didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He stepped closer, lowering his voice until it barely carried over the sound of crickets in the yard. "You think Daniel's trying to get you fired? That's not all. He's gonna ruin you, burn your whole life down if you're not careful." Linda's stomach twisted. Why would he bother? He's already got me by the throat. Hank glanced over his shoulder again, rubbing the back of his neck like the words hurt coming out. "Because it's personal now. He's not just coming for your badge, he's coming for your name, your reputation, your legacy, everything." Linda felt her heart skip. "How do you know that?" He sighed, leaning in closer. "Because I've seen him work before. Back when he was still climbing the ladder. You remember that scandal in Montgomery? The one where half the department retired early and nobody ever explained why?" She nodded slowly. She remembered the rumors. But she never knew who pulled the strings. "It was him," Hank whispered. "He took them down one by one, made 'em all look like they fell on their own swords. By the time anyone figured it out, it was too late. He'd already walked away clean." Linda's breath hitched. This wasn't just some political stunt. This was a setup, the kind of game she didn't even know she was playing until she was already losing. "You're telling me I've got no shot?" she whispered. But Hank shook his head. "I'm telling you, you've got one. But you've got to hit back. Hard and fast. You dig into his past. You find something he doesn't want out there. You put him on the ropes before he finishes what he started." Linda swallowed hard, her pulse thumping in her ears. She didn't have friends left in that department. She didn't have backup. But maybe, just maybe, she had one last move. She nodded once, slow but certain. "All right," she breathed. "If he wants to play dirty, I'll show him how it's done." Linda barely slept after that talk with Hank. She just sat at her kitchen table, eyes locked on that old box of files she kept in the corner stuff her husband left behind when he passed. Names, notes, rumors. She wasn't even sure half of it was worth anything anymore, but it was all she had. If Daniel Price wanted to burn her to the ground, then she was going to make damn sure she didn't go alone. If she was going down, she'd take him with her. She pulled out her laptop, cracked her knuckles, and started digging. City records, news archives, public complaints, anything with Daniel's name on it. She scrolled for hours, until her eyes stung and her neck felt like it was made of concrete. Most of it was clean. Too clean, like somebody had already done a sweep. But Linda knew how this game worked. The bigger the smile, the dirtier the hands. And sure enough, right around 2 in the morning, buried in an old newspaper from Chicago, found it. An article so old the website barely loaded. But the headline was still there, clear as day. Deputy Commissioner tied to bribery allegations in Chicago's South Side crackdown. It was small. Tucked away on page 6. No official charges. No arrests. Just whispers about payouts, drug busts getting covered up. And one name that kept popping up, Daniel Price. Her heart started racing. She clicked through every link, saving every screenshot she could find. She wasn't stupid. This wasn't a smoking gun, but it was something. Enough to get the press sniffing around again. Enough to put some cracks in that perfect image he'd built. By sunrise, Linda had a plan. She called in a favor from a local reporter, Samantha Dean, someone who'd always been itching to expose corruption in city leadership. They weren't exactly friends, but Samantha had tried for years to get cops to talk. Linda figured now was as good a time as any to make that call. She slid into a booth at Mickey's Diner, head low under a ball cap, nursing a black coffee like her life depended on it. Samantha showed up 10 minutes later, recorder already in hand, eyes sharp and hungry for a headline. "You sure you want to do this?" Samantha asked, leaning in, lowering her voice. "You go public with this. There's no going back." Linda leaned across the table, her voice steady, her hands shaking just a little. "He's coming for me, Samantha. He's already turned this town against me. I've got nothing left to lose." She handed over the screenshots, every last detail she'd dug up. Names, dates, the works. Samantha didn't waste a second. She stood up, gave Linda a tight nod, and walked out without looking back. By the next morning, it hit the news like a bomb. Mobile's new commissioner under fire for Chicago corruption tease. It was everywhere, local television, social media, even national blogs picking it up. People started asking questions. Protesters showed up again, but this time their signs looked different. "Who's protecting us from Daniel Price? Clean house, top to bottom." And Linda? She watched it all unfold from her living room, her heart pounding like she'd just run a marathon. She could almost feel the power shifting back in her favor. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she had the upper hand. Until her phone rang. Blocked number. She answered anyway. "Linda." That voice. Daniel Price. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound rattled. He just sounded calm, like none of it mattered. "You really think this little stunt's gonna save you?" he asked, almost laughing. "You've made it clear how far you're willing to go. I guess it's my turn now." The line went dead before she could even get a word out. Her stomach twisted. That didn't sound like a man who was on the ropes. That sounded like a man loading the next round. She rushed to the station first thing the next morning, determined to confront him face to face. She didn't care who saw. She didn't care if it was the last move she ever made in that building. She stormed through the front doors, pushing past officers who barely had the guts to look at her. She shoved open the door to his office, fists clenched, breathing heavy. "You think you can scare me off that easy?" she snapped. Daniel looked up from his desk, not even surprised to see her standing there. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers under his chin. "You're done, Linda," he said, like he was giving her the weather report. "Your badge. Your pension. Your name. You're finished. You just don't know it yet." Linda leaned across the desk, eyes burning. "You're gonna have to come a hell of a lot harder than that to break me," she hissed. And Daniel, he just smiled. Not the kind of smile that says you've won. Number. The kind of smile that says you just stepped into the trap. Linda walked out of that office thinking she'd landed the punch of her career. That headline, that protest flipping back on Daniel, it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in weeks. But by the time the sun started to set, that breath turned to ice in her chest. She got the call just after dinner, standing in her kitchen staring at the half-empty bottle of bourbon on the counter. It was Kenny, her rookie partner, his voice shaking on the other end of the line. "Linda, you need to come down here, right now." She didn't ask questions, just grabbed her keys and bolted. She pulled into the precinct parking lot, heart pounding, expecting chaos. But when she stepped through the doors, everything was Silent. Dead silent. Too silent, like the air had already been sucked out of the building. And there, standing in the hallway with his arms crossed like he'd been waiting all day, was Daniel Price. He didn't move, he didn't smile, he just nodded toward the conference room. Linda followed him in, her stomach twisting tighter with every step. And that's when she saw it. Sitting on the table was a recorder, and standing next to it was Kenny. Linda's throat closed. She turned to Kenny, trying to read his face, but he wouldn't look at her. Daniel hit play, and there it was her voice, raw and ugly, spilling out of that tiny speaker. Clear as day. These people think they run this city, think they can do whatever they want. Somebody needs to put them back in their place. Linda's knees almost buckled. She knew exactly when she'd said it, right after that stop with Daniel, sitting in the cruiser, venting her rage to Kenny, never thinking for a second that anyone was listening, but someone had been. Kenny recorded every word. "You son of a—" she started, lunging for him, but Daniel stepped between them, calm as ever. "Sit down," he ordered. Linda froze. For the first time in 35 years, she obeyed. Kenny finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to, Linda, but they would have come for me next. I had to protect myself." Linda felt like the walls were closing in again, tighter than ever. Daniel leaned on the table, staring her dead in the eye. "You wanted to play dirty? This is what dirty looks like." Linda clenched her fists so tight she felt her nails dig into her palms. "You set me up," Daniel nodded slowly, "and you walked right into it." By the time they finished reading her the official charges conduct unbecoming hate speech violation, pending review for termination with cause, Linda could barely stand. Her blood boiled, her ears rang, and her vision blurred with pure, seething rage. She stormed out of that room, nearly tearing the door off its hinges. Officers in the bullpen turned to watch, wide-eyed, but no one said a word. They didn't have to. They all knew. The headline tomorrow wouldn't be about Daniel Price. It would be about Linda Crawford, the racist cop who finally got what was coming to her. And in that moment, she knew she was finished. Unless she found a way to flip the board one more time. Linda didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. She just sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty walls of her house like they were closing in on her. Her badge gone. Her pension hanging by a thread. And her name splashed all over every news station in the state. It didn't matter that she'd spent 35 years in uniform. It didn't matter how many people she'd pulled out of burning cars, or how many nights she'd spent working double shifts to keep this town safe. All anyone saw now was that headline. Mobile officer caught on tape, racist rant exposed. She didn't leave the house for 2 days. Not for food, not for air. The only thing louder than the silence was the noise in her head. Every word of that recording, echoing over and over, louder and uglier each time. On the third morning, she finally caved. She couldn't sit there anymore. Couldn't stand the walls pressing in on her. She needed out. She grabbed her keys, threw on a hoodie, and headed toward the station, not because she had to, but because she didn't know where else to go. It was the only place that ever made sense, and now it felt like enemy territory. When she pulled up, the parking lot was half empty. No protesters, no cameras, no noise, just stillness. Like the building itself had already moved on without her. She made her way inside, every step heavier than the last. The bullpen, usually buzzing with chatter and radios and ringing phones, was dead quiet. The officers who did look up didn't say a word. Some of them just shook their heads like they already knew she was finished. And then she saw it. Her disk, M2. Not just cleared off, but completely stripped. No files, no badge, not even her chair. Just an envelope sitting right in the middle. Her name scribbled on the front in black marker. She picked it up with shaking hands, already knowing what it was. Termination. Effective immediately. No appeal. No hearing. Sine Daniel Price. She stood there for a long time, staring at that signature. The weight of it hit her harder than anything she'd felt in her life. It was over. She turned to leave, but as she reached the door, she heard the whispers starting again. The snickers, the sideways glances. She didn't have to turn around to know exactly what they were thinking. About time. She finally got what was coming. She's done. She pushed through the doors and out into the parking lot, her chest burning, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. She should have felt defeated, should have felt broken, but as she stood there, staring up at the gray Alabama sky, all she felt was one thing: fire. Because Daniel Price might have taken her badge, he might have taken her pension, but he hadn't taken her fight. Not yet. And as Linda Crawford climbed into her truck and slammed the door shut behind her, she knew one thing for sure. If he thought she was done, he was dead wrong. Funny thing about losing everything, you start seeing things real clear. Clearer than you ever did when you were on top. Linda spent the next few weeks laying low. The headlines moved on. The protests died down. And Mobile went right back to pretending nothing had ever happened. That's the thing about small towns. They've got short memories, as long as the noise stops. She stayed out of sight, mostly driving around at night, windows down, radio off, just listening to the emptiness. Sometimes she'd pass by the station, just to torture herself, she guessed. The place didn't even look the same anymore. It was cleaner, quieter, colder. And Daniel? His SUV wasn't parked out front anymore. Rumor had it he was working remotely, keeping his distance while things cooled down. Word finally broke a few days later. Daniel Price had officially resigned. No press conference, no apology, no public statement. Just a quiet resignation letter slipped through City Hall. The man who brought her down walked away like he never even showed up. And Linda? She should have felt satisfied, should have felt like she'd won something. But she didn't. Not really, because what was there to win? Her badge was gone, her name was dirt, her career was over. And the town? They'd already moved on. That's when she got the call. An old friend from church, running a small outreach program on the north side. Kids who'd grown up the same way she had, tough, angry, and ready to fight the world. They needed help. Volunteers. Someone to just show up and listen. Linda almost hung up. She almost told them they had the wrong person. But something in her chest stopped her. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was knowing she had nothing left to lose. So she showed up. She walked through those doors with nothing but a chipped coffee mug and a name nobody wanted to hear anymore. And you know what? Nobody there cared who she used to be. Nobody asked about her badge or her rank or the years she spent on the street. They just needed someone to sit in those folding chairs and listen. And for the first time in her life, Linda actually listened. Not like a cop, not like someone trying to fix anybody. Just a human being. She sat with kids who reminded her of the very people she used to profile without even knowing it. People who carried the same weight she'd judged from the safety of her cruiser. And she realized something she should have seen a long time ago. She wasn't protecting anyone. She was protecting herself. Her fear, her pride, her reputation. All those years, she thought power came from the badge on her chest, but it didn't. It came from owning the damage you've done and choosing to do better. So, she kept showing up, week after week. No headlines, no recognition, just small moments, real moments, conversations that felt more honest than anything she'd ever had wearing that uniform. And maybe that's what justice really looks like. Not viral videos, not protests, not resignations or firings. Just people facing their own mess and trying like hell to do better the next day. Linda Crawford didn't get her job back. She didn't get her reputation back. But what she did get was something she never thought she'd find again. A way to matter. And as she sat on that worn-out metal folding chair, surrounded by the very people she used to fear, she finally understood. You don't fight to save your name. You fight to change who you are before it's too late. You know, when you strip away all the drama, the headlines, the protests, the politics, what's left is something a whole lot simpler and a whole lot harder to face. It's the truth about what power really does to people. See, Linda spent 35 years thinking her badge made her right, that just wearing that uniform meant she was the good guy. But the truth is, power doesn't make you right, it just makes your mistakes louder. And here's the part that really hits home. We all carry that same choice, whether we wear a badge or not. We can lead with fear, always trying to control, defend, or protect our pride. Or we can lead with humility. We can listen. We can learn. We can admit when we're wrong and start over, no matter how late it feels. And for those of us a little older, who've lived long enough to make our share of mistakes, maybe the real legacy we leave isn't how long we stood in power, but how willing we were to change when it mattered most. If you believe in accountability, if you believe people can change, and if you want more stories that hit you right here, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on that little bell so you don't miss the